All right, so this is the last slide of the World War I PowerPoint. The last video we talked about a couple things: America entering the war and why it entered the war, Wilson's evolution on regarding his stance. We looked at the Western Front in 1917. One more time, I think it's really important to know that what's going on the Eastern Front is having an impact on the Western Front. Right, Russia's about to be out. And therefore, Germany decides to buy some time on the Western Front with that Hindenburg Line. March 3rd, 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is signed. Russia's involvement in the war is officially done, over. So now you can start to shift all, if you're the Germans, you can start to shift all your men, your resources, over to the Western Front. So by early March of 1918, the Germans had an overall superiority of 10%. They had far more fresh divisions than the Allies on the Western Front. The Americans are not quite there yet. April 6, 1917, America declares war, but remember, they only have a fighting force at that time of a little bit over 100,000 men. That's just a drop in the bucket that for what's needed. So they have to, have the Selective Service Act. They have to train the soldiers. They have to transport the soldiers over there, and all the other supplies that go along with fighting the war. And we see America's, involvement in this total war on the home front. Just like we saw Great Britain and Germany's. But on the Western Front, March of 1918, the Germans are looking like they're in a good position. Ludendorff is going to decide to risk everything on one last charge. And it says game there. I apologize. It's actually one last charge, one last gain, I guess you could say. He's able to persuade Hindenburg and Kaiser Wilhelm to make one last final drive for victory in France. He does this because he knows by the summer Germany would have no more reserves left. They also know by doing this, it's taking a risk. Failure would mean total defeat. Ludendorff was staking all his country had on a desperate wage, right? That he could beat France and Great Britain before the Americans could come and help. And he came really close to doing this. For 4 months here, Ludendorff keeps up this constant series of attacks on the Western Front. We see 5 separate German offensives that managed to drive the Allies back 40 miles. By the end of May 1918, the Germans are at the Marne River again. However, even if the French don't know this, they're really not in the danger that they were in 1914. Ludendorff was actually at the end of his resources. So he had to halt this advance for 6 weeks as he tried to resupply and reinforce his troops. But when he tries to move again in mid-July, this time the Allies are ready. You see in July 18, 1918, the French counterattack the Germans at the Second Battle of the Marne. And this time you have 9 American divisions. So that's around, 90,000 ballpark here. 90,000 American troops are going to have involvement in this counterattack at the Second Battle of the Marne. And just like the First Battle of the Marne, the Second Battle of the Marne is a great Allied victory. In August 8th, 1918, this is known as the Black Day of the German Army. We see now this is when the whole front begins to roll back towards the German border. The Germans will never retreat all the way back onto German soil. By the armistice, they're still on French soil. However, after this Black Day, the outcome of the war was never in doubt. The only question was when the fighting would end. By mid-September, the Germans are back at the Hindenburg Line, and by the end of October, the Germans were outnumbered on the Western Front by 40%. They only had 1 reserve division left, and then in less than 3 months, they had lost almost 300,000 prisoners of war. At home for Germany, the morale had cracked. That attrition of morale that we talked about at the very beginning. We see revolution happening in the streets. We see mutiny happening with German sailors. November 8th. We see a German armistice commission meet the Allies for the first time. November 9th, Kaiser Wilhelm abdicates and steps down. He's going to flee to the Netherlands. The German Republic, all right, this democratization of Germany has been established. The German Republic is established November 9th. And then on the 11th day of the 11th month, at the 11th hour, right? The armistice is signed, setting up for the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. The balance sheet that we look on the right hand side, you see, the losses that the countries that experienced. France is laid in ruins. Some of this land in France has been so beaten up that it won't ever be able to be cultivated again for farming. The Allied blockade on Germany and Austria-Hungary was so devastating that the cities were at the point of reaching extreme hunger. We see millions of civilians dead or dying from malnutrition and disease. We see an influenza epidemic rock the entire world. We see typhus, cholera. All right. Basically, by the end of 1918, the entire Western world, right, has been rocked, and they've been weakened. And I think one of the things that we don't think about when we look at the results of World War One is the breakdown in the psyche and the confidence and the mentality of these men and the women and children that survived this experience of the last 4 years. This sets us up for that reading on the aims and goals of the Paris Peace participants, and we will look at why Germany lost the war when we come back to school on Tuesday.